Henry Garnett, sometimes Henry Garnett, was an English Jesuit priest executed for his complicity in the Gunpowder Plot of 1605. Born in Heanor, Derbyshire, he was educated in Nottingham and later at Winchester College before he moved to London in 1571 to work for a publisher. There he professed an interest in legal studies, and in 1575 he travelled to the continent and joined the Society of Jesus. He was ordained in Rome sometime around 1582. In 1586 Garnet returned to England as part of the Jesuit mission, soon succeeding Father William Weston as Jesuit superior. Following the latter's capture by the English authorities, Garnet established a secret press which lasted until late 1588, and in 1594 he interceded in the Wisbech stirs, a dispute between secular and regular clergy. He preferred a passive approach to the problems Catholics faced in England, approving of the disclosure by Catholic priests of the existence of the 1603 byplot, and exhorting English Catholics not to engage in violent rebellion. In summer 1605 Garnet met with Robert Catesby, a religious zealot who, unknown to him, planned to kill the Protestant King James I. The existence of Catesby's Gunpowder Plot was revealed to him by Father Oswald Tessamond on the 24th of July 1605, but as the information was received under the seal of the confessional, he felt that canon law prevented him from speaking out. Instead, without telling anyone of what Catesby planned, he wrote to his superiors in Rome, urging them to warn English Catholics against the use of force. When the plot failed, Garnet went into hiding, but he was eventually arrested on the 27th of January 1606. He was taken to London and interrogated by the Privy Council, whose members included John Popham, Edward Coke and Robert Cecil, 1st Earl of Salisbury. Imprisoned in the Tower of London, his conversations with fellow prisoner Edward Oldcorn were monitored by eavesdroppers, and his letters to friends such as Anne Vaux were intercepted. His guilt, announced at the end of his trial on the 28th of March 1606, was a foregone conclusion. Criticized for his use of equivocation, which Coke called open and broad lying and forswearing, and attacked for not warning the authorities of what Catesby planned, he was sentenced to be hanged, drawn and quartered. He was executed on the 3rd of May 1606. Early life. Henry Garnett was born sometime around July 1555 at Heanor in Derbyshire, son of Brian Garnett and Alice. He had at least 5 siblings, 2 brothers, Richard and John, and 3 sisters, Margaret, Eleanor and Anne, all of whom became nuns at Leuven. Henry studied at the grammar school in Nottingham where, from 1565, his father was master. Following his election as a scholar on the 24th of August 1567, in 1568 he entered Winchester College where he apparently excelled. His love of music and rare and delightful voice were complemented by an ability to perform songs without preparation, and he was reportedly also skilled with the lute. Father Thomas Stanley wrote that Garnet was the prime scholar of Winchester College, very skillful in music and in playing upon the instruments, very modest in his countenance and in all his actions, so much that the schoolmasters and wardens offered him very great friendship, to be placed by the means in New College, Oxford, Rome. Garnet did not enter New College. Instead, late in 1571, he left Winchester for London. There he worked for a legal publisher, Richard Tottle, as a proofreader and corrector. He often dined with Sir John Popham, who as Lord Chief Justice was to preside over the trial of the Gunpowder plotters, men whose association with Garnet would eventually prove so fateful. Although Garnet professed to profess an interest in legal studies, in 1575 he sailed for Portugal with Giles Gallop to enter the Society of Jesus. The two men travelled to Rome and on the 11th of September 1575 were accepted into the church at Sant'Andrea della Vale. Garnet studied under the theologian Father Robert Bellarmine. Two of his professors, Christopher Clavius and Robert Bellarmine, praised his abilities. He was ordained sometime around 1582 and stayed in Rome as a professor of Hebrew, lecturing also in metaphysics and mathematics. He was also an English confessor at St. Peter's, but in May 1584 his academic career was curtailed when, perhaps as a consequence of a petition from the Jesuit superior for England, William Weston, Father Robert Persons asked that he be sent to England. The Superior General Claudio Acquaviva, who saw Garnet as his successor, refused this request. He thought Garnet more suited to the quiet life than that which awaited him in England, but on the 2nd of May 1586 he relented and allowed him to leave. Appointed superior for the journey, Garnet travelled with Robert Southwell, leaving for Calais on the 8th of May. He landed near Folkestone early in July 1586, England. After meeting the Jesuit superior for England, William Weston, at a London inn, Garnet, Southwell and Weston travelled to Halsford, near Marlow, Buckinghamshire, spending just over a week at the home of Richard Bold. They engaged in prayer and masses, and also took confessions. They discussed the mission in England, deciding to meet each year in February and August. Weston also gave the two men details of Catholic houses that would shelter them. Acquaviva had instructed that should anything happen to Weston, Garnet was to succeed him as superior in England, which he did when only days after leaving Halsford. Weston was captured en route to London. Acquaviva had also given Garnet permission to print pro-Catholic literature, and so early the next year he met Southwell in London to discuss the establishment of a secret press, which was probably located somewhere around a former Augustinian hospital near Spitalfields. It lasted until late 1588 and was responsible for a consolatory letter to all the afflicted Catholics in England, author unknown, and an epistle of comfort by Southwell. From a friend's window in Ludgate Hill, Garnet witnessed the November 1588 procession to a Thanksgiving service at Old St. Paul's Cathedral, celebrating the failed Spanish invasion. Spain's actions gave Garnet much cause for concern, for when we thought that there was an end to these disasters by which we are already nearly destroyed, our hope was suddenly turned to sorrow. And now, with redoubled effort, the overseers are pressing upon us. People were allowed to spectate from windows only if the loyalty to Queen Elizabeth I was guaranteed by the householder. In a letter to Acquaviva, Garnet said that many of his supporters thought that he was more concerned for the Queen than her Calvinist ministers. In light of the Armada's destruction, he also wrote to the general to ask for advice on two versions of a proposed oath to allow Roman Catholics to swear their allegiance to the Queen. The government's version required that Catholics reject the Pope's authority over Elizabeth, whereas a Catholic version proposed that they recognize her authority and would wish with every effort to struggle to thwart and to fight to the death all those who will in any way endanger the life of Her Highness. The Privy Council rejected the latter. Garnet's first few years in England were spent meeting new priests in London, including John Gerard and Edward Oldcorn. Jesuits had been banished from England since 1585, and if discovered they risked being charged with high treason. Avoiding pursuers was therefore a recurrent problem, and Garnet was almost caught on several occasions. As a result of an almost disastrous meeting at Baddesley Clinton in 1591, when he and many others were almost captured together while renewing their vows, he reorganized the mission into 11 smaller groups, each assigned 2 weeks annually. Following Southwell's capture in June 1592, and the search of Anne Vaux and Eleanor Brooksby's rented house in Warwickshire, he wrote to Aquaviva to ask for an assistant who could succeed him as superior. Henry Walpole was thus dispatched, but was captured on his arrival in December 1593, and executed in York in April 1595. Garnet believed that it was his duty to observe the executions of his fellow priests, so as to secretly administer the last rites, and he may have been present at Southwell's execution at Tyburn in 1595. The latter's death was a significant blow for Garnet, who later wrote of the intolerable burden of loneliness he carried while in England. In November 1593, Garnet travelled to the decrepit and decayed Wisbech Castle, requisitioned by the government in 1579 for the internment of Catholic priests. William Weston was held there. The castle's inhabitants were supported by Catholic alms and lived a relatively comfortable existence. Garnet was complimentary about Wisbech, calling it a college of venerable confessors. The following year he mediated in a dispute between secular and regular clergy, which became known as the Wisbech Stirs. The argument was settled by the end of the year, but Garnet was concerned that reports of discontent at the Jesuit-administered English College in Roman tension between some Catholic English exiles in Brussels might undermine his efforts to stabilize the situation.